recording what was going on. You were doing a video and you were getting ready to podcast it. So I thought initially I would tailor my remarks so the podcast got as much play on the internet as possible. So I want to welcome all you macacas out there. But seriously, thank you so much for being here. I'm a little disappointed. I was going to bring my own recorder, but I thought no, it's going to be covered. It's all right. It's going to go out to the ether. Nobody's recording, right? Sorry.
I am.
Oh. Okay, great. Well, thanks for recording. I'd like a copy. I think it's essential to take things like this and put them on the internet as much as we can. I started this process around 2003. Some of you may remember in a committee meeting here, Senator Hatch was talking about copyright, and he asked the question, would it be possible to set up a computer so that it would automatically destroy itself if it downloaded something that's copyrighted? And, you know, that was a drink-spitting moment where you're sitting on your computer and all of a sudden you're spraying all over the screen. And I was really angry. I was really angry because not only I thought that was a terrible idea, I thought it was a terrible idea from a technical standpoint, I thought it was also a terrible idea from a legal standpoint. And being in a business where I have about 200 computers of my own, and about 500 computers that are brought in by companies and co-locators, we have a significant base that could be dramatically affected by policies like that. I can't watch my employees 24 hours a day. I certainly do not condone copyright and theft or violation. But if somebody did that on a computer, I would lose an employee and I'd lose the computer as well. So angrily, I wrote my response back to Senator Hatch. I've written him a few times. I've written the president a few times, Clinton and Bush. I've tried to be civically active, and I wrote Senator Hatch. I said, I find you ill-informed on this issue. And I'll do whatever I can in 2006 to see that you are on TV. Well, at the time, I was not thinking about running for office. But as time went on, I helped some other Democrats out with their races. I helped Paul Van Dam out with his Senate race. I worked a little bit on the mayoral race in Salt Lake City, not with the guy who's in right now, but with the guy who was opposing him. And I started asking around. I said, who is going to be challenging Senator Hatch in 2006? And I get these blank stares. And I'm like, why are you thinking about that now? Why in the world would you be wondering? And 2004 rolled around, the election happened, and in 2005 went around, and I started asking the people in office. I went up to the Hill and made appointments with Senator Ed May, who was the Democratic Senate Minority. And I sat down with him. I said, what many Democrats got lined up in 2006? Well, I don't know, are you thinking about doing it or whatever? I haven't heard anything. That situation was unacceptable. Because I knew that if somebody was going to get in and challenge Orrin Hatch, they would have to get in, do it full time, do it early, and work as hard as possible to do it. So around the beginning of 2005, I started thinking about whether this is something I want to do. I talked to my family, I talked to my employees, I talked to my friends, and I started throwing it off them, asking them, well, do you think I'd make a good candidate? What do you think about me running for office? And they were all very supportive, but they echoed my sentiment that if I was going to do it, I would have to get out there early, work hard, do it full time, and maybe, just maybe, I'd have a chance. So in March of 2005, I declared and started running for office. And it was really interesting the reaction I got, because it's not very often you get a small, successful business owner running for office in the Democratic Party. So the Democrats were really excited, and I think they were excited not only because they saw a viable candidate in me, but they thought that this is a guy who's obviously done well with his business, who could give $2 million to the race. Well, I probably could if I completely tapped out all my resources, maybe sold part of my business, sold off some of my property, put my family at risk. That wasn't an option. I also find it extremely distasteful that people try and buy their way into the Senate. People try and buy their way into the House of Representatives. Or, people try to buy their way into the mayor's race. I wanted to try, like they said, be the candidate that I would want to vote for as a constituent. And one of the things that really bothered me about candidates in the past is that they would come to me at exhibitions and say, we'd really like to check. That's about all it was. You know, I sometimes give them money, and then I would say, well, do you want to sit down and talk about my ideas? And like, well, some other time we'll get together, I promise. And it never happened. They just were interested in the money, they weren't interested in the policy. So I saw a real problem here in policy. As I started going around the state, talking to people in 2005, I saw other problems. I saw a universal disconnect between people, local government, and federal government. I saw people saying, you know what happens in Washington is independent of my life. When I need help from Washington, it never comes. And when I don't need help from Washington, they're there micromanaging. So I started seeing that as a breakdown in communication. And my background is uniquely suited for resolving communication. So I started thinking about what can I do in my campaign that will build a bridge and resolve some of these issues of communication, and something I can take to Washington after I'm elected. So I completely overhauled my campaign last summer, and I put up a wiki, which has gotten some attention. I started expanding my blog, so it's more of a full-on blog rather than just me talking. And I started encouraging people to participate in an open fashion with my campaign. I wasn't asking for just Democrats to come out with my campaign, I was asking for Americans to come out with my campaign. And that attitude, that strategy, got a lot of attention, not only throughout the country, but worldwide. People were coming to the website and sending me emails saying, you know what, this is a new way to approach democracy. And I started to realize that the foundation of democracy is communication. The better communication we can have, the better democracy, the better representation. That it's arrogant for our elected officials to go back to Washington and say, I'm an expert on everything. I understand it all. I don't need any help from anybody. I just need some help from these lobbyists, special interests, and campaign donors. And that's all. What the wiki does is not eliminate those influences. It raises the voice of the people to be equal to them. And I have changed my mind on subjects that we discussed this week. I have refined my positions in other areas over what has been discussed. New information has been brought to me. Different points of view have been brought to me. Everybody in this room has an area of expertise that they are good at. And if they only had the opportunity to share it with our government, this would be a much more efficient government. And the wiki is also great in the sense that, you know, we think that if we send off our emails, send off our letters, and make our phone calls, we'll somehow be listened to in Washington. Well, sometimes we get a response back, sometimes it's germane to what we were talking about in the first place. But more often than not, our voices are ignored. What the wiki is good at is taking a diverse group of people, getting them to work together on the subject, and the best solutions rise to the top. So I'm really excited about some of these ideas. These are ideas I'm committed to, regardless of the turnout of this race. When I win this race, I'm going to take it back to Washington. If by some miracle Senator Hatch wins this race, I'm going to commit to pushing these ideas on other candidates and get these ideas out here. I'm going to continue to use them in races in the future. Because I think this is something that can reform our democracy without having to turn over our democracy at a revolution. It's kind of a revolution that happens in the codified of the Constitution. And I think it's something that Thomas Jefferson would have loved. Thomas Jefferson would have absolutely embraced it. Because it is using the expertise of the people to resolve a problem nationwide. Now, some of the problems that have come up on there, you're more than welcome to ask me about tonight. What I was specifically asked to talk about tonight was net neutrality. I think my experience and my background is especially suited towards the net neutrality problem, and I'm open to your view. But this is one of the areas that I feel like I do have good expertise. I feel like I do have strength in the internet because I have been on the internet since 1987. And I've been running exhibitions since 1993. first pipe I had to the internet. And there was a little bit of back and forth there where the University of Utah wasn't sure they wanted to sell it, and somebody was going to negotiate with the internet in such a commercial basis. Somebody was going to go out and resell the unit. Because up to that point, they had sold it to companies like Evans and Sutherland, who I was working for at the time. They sold it to YCAT and a number of other technology companies throughout Utah. They really had an approach that questioned of mass commercialization. So it really did take a discussion with them. But they did eventually sell me the connection. Things went well, things took off. And in 1994, other entities, other internet service providers like myself around the country started springing up. And commercialization of the internet made the National Science Foundation very uncomfortable. It felt like we're a government entity, we shouldn't be in this market. It's becoming so commercial, we should hand it over for commercial entities. Now, when they did that in 1994, they set up what was called peering points. Peering points were supposed to be a neutral handoff, where Sprint could meet MCI and hand off traffic to each other. But what happened with peering points was the first violation of net neutrality. We never discussed this. It's that if, as exhibition, I want to get into a peering point, which most of them will allow me into. I mean, it's pretty much like a colo game. You just have to, they have to have space for selling. You buy it, and then you go in and set up your equipment, and then you try and negotiate peering contracts with the other providers. What happens is MCI will not peer with me because of these, in my opinion, ludicrous reasons. They say, well, you're not diverse enough. You don't have a peering point in New York and Tel Aviv and Japan, and you don't run on OC 192 backbone. You're not somebody we want to peer with. You don't meet our requirements. And there's nothing legally saying MCI that they have to peer with me. Now, my argument is that even though I'm a small fish, MCI has as much need to get to my network as I need to get to theirs. That is, there are people on my network who are serving web pages that MCI customers need to get to. There are people that are trying to send emails to MCI customers. And so that data is going to hit their network sooner or later. They might as well do it in an efficient manner. So what I argue for is multi-lateral peering agreements where if you're a peering point, every entity in that peering operation has to peer with you. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen, and more often than not, I'm buying the majority of my bandwidth from telcos. So that's the first violation of network neutrality that nobody's talking about. But what is happening today is you had this guy named BellSouth, the CEO of BellSouth, come out and say, you know what, Google uses a lot of my traffic. Google should be paying me to traverse my network. I'm not getting enough money from Google. Well, he's forgetting, again, that Google needs him as much as he needs Google. And that if he deprioritizes Google's traffic to be somewhere on the bottom because they're not paying the extortion that BellSouth, his customers are going to be calling up and saying, why can't I get to Google? Why is Google slow? I know this because I've dealt with those customers. I've dealt with those customers that say, I can't get to the site, can you diagnose it for me? And I would not enforce any sort of arbitrary prioritization on websites just because they were not paying the extortion to me, because I'm going to have to pay for it sooner or later with customer dissatisfaction. So I think the internet is uniquely suited to this free market ideal, that everyone on the internet is exchanging traffic back and forth. Big or small, we all need each other. So I take the stand on network neutrality that the government, good wishes, good intent of the government to say, this is free speech of the internet. Everything needs to be remain free and equal on the internet is a bad decision. Because in my opinion, everything does not need to be free and equal on the internet. Spammers do not need to be free and equal on the internet. People doing denial of service attacks on my network do not need to be free and equal on the internet. And if somebody's trying to damage my network, I have every right to block them so the rest of my customers are served properly. Now, what legislation does is, the road to hell is paved with good intention. And they'll put forward this legislation that says everything on the network needs to be equal. And suddenly, and they can make accommodations. Some of the bills I've read do make accommodations for damaging traffic and spamming, but they don't have a crystal ball to understand what comes in the future. So For example, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. Good intentions, bad results. The internet service providers have to respond to every request to investigate copyright violations, whether it's valid or not. So what happens is you have Sony, MGM, Universal running these bots that look for search terms inside networks. They look for names of movies, and then they send off an email automatically to the abuse address or the address that is dictated inside the registered agent address, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. They send off these mails automatically. And suddenly, instead of 1 or 2 a week, we're getting hundreds a week. We're getting hundreds a week from these copyright holders asking us to be their copyright police. That is an unintended side effect of this legislation, and I have no doubt that trying to do good with network neutrality would also have unintended side effects. I think the market is working as it should with network neutrality, and when you've got people like Ted Stevens regulating the intertubes, bad idea to be writing legislation, because I do not feel comfortable with Ted Stevens telling me how a router should work. I feel comfortable with the internet service providers making decisions. Now, no, I do believe that telcos and cable companies do want to serve their own best interests. They do want to monopolize the market more often than not. And over the past decade, I have fought against that monopolization. I've fought against that not only by lobbying on the Hill, by lobbying Washington. I've fought that with hard-earned dollars as well. I've hired attorneys to fight against Quest. And I also lobby very heavily for Utopia, because I think Utopia is a great way to level the playing field. Everyone participates on an equal level, and if we could have municipal fiber throughout this nation, we wouldn't have a question of network neutrality, because the network would be inherently neutral. So that's the other side of what I'm pushing at. But I have to admit, there's been a lot of people on the internet that have looked at my network neutrality and said, I don't understand what he's talking about. I think everyone in this room can understand what I'm talking about, but we are the super minority. Everyone else is out there thinking, free speech on the internet sounds good to me, let's push it forward. That is why we need people with technology expertise in lobbying. The LA Times wrote an article about a month ago about how there's nobody in Washington that's the go-to guy on technology. The average age in the U.S. Senate is 60. These people barely can turn on their computers. That's about it. Yet technology is the underpinning of our lives, and it's so essential to have people back there. So I hope that not only you vote for me in November, you support my candidacy, but you consider running yourselves, because we need other people that understand technology in Washington across the board. Right now, we've got attorneys, silver spoons, billionaires, and big businessmen, and that's the kind of representation we're getting. So I'm attacking this on a number of levels. I'm also talking about campaign finance and the fact that there'll be a watershed event in U.S. politics where somebody wins a race on the power of the internet. And I know this will happen because it's happened in business. Google, eBay, Yahoo. When they were starting up, did any of you ever see a television ad for them? I did. They got millions of subscribers on networking alone. And I believe the same thing is possible with politics. And when that happens, we're all going to be better off, because instead of this $1 million proposition to run for office, it's $100. Anyone can jump in and reminds me of my own. When we have a government that is truly representative, we'll all be better off. That's the summary. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have about network neutrality, about the campaign, or on specific issues. Yeah, Phil.
One of the biggest issues for me is I really want to see term limits, and I'm just wondering where you stand on that and how you feel about it.
The thing that bothers me about term limits is I view them as anti-democratic. I think the voters should make the choice, and that goes for the president as well. The problem with not having term limits is that we don't have a democratic system as it is. We have a system that is whoever has the most money can get out the best marketing and overwhelm their opponent. So what I have pledged to do is try to destroy the incumbent advantage. Senator Hatch raised, and this is in $76, he raised about $150,000 to unseat Senator Moss in 76. In a subsequent race in 82, when he was running against Ted Wilson, he raised $4 million. The incumbent always has the advantage. Jim Matheson's in the same situation. 80% of Jim Matheson's money comes from PACs. PACs do not put bets on challengers because they think that's impossible for them to win. So I've pledged to destroy the incumbent advantage, and that's either through public financing or shared financing, and also to destroy the seniority system in the United States Congress, because I feel that the seniority system serves the state senior senators, but it doesn't serve America. A good example is the bridge to nowhere in Alaska. Ted Stevens is the most senior individual in the Senate. So if I can destroy the seniority system, then I think everyone's going to be a lot better off, because the challengers are going to be unseating incumbents more often. It's going to be based on their ideas rather than their marketing or their money. If I can't destroy the seniority system, I pledge to only serve 3 terms. And, you know, you may approach that with a lot of skepticism, and I don't blame you, but because a lot of other people said that. I think Chris Cannon said 3 terms as well. Bob Bennett said 2 terms, and I keep hearing that Orrin Hatch said 3. We haven't found that. What I did in my campaign pledges, and there are 5 of them, they're online for you to see if you want to look at the rest of them, is I printed it up, signed it, notarized it, and I sent it off to the chairs of the Republican Party. So if they can't hold me to the promises, those promises, I don't know. I think though that term limits would be a very short-term solution to fix the problem.
And I agree with you that it's undemocratic, but we don't seem to have a system of responsibility either. Where, I mean, how does Ted Kennedy keep getting reelected? There can't be that many morons that are voting. I don't understand.
It's the same situation as here. You know, these guys have the name recognition, they have the money, they have the contact, they have the system, and they've got seniority in the Senate. So that's their only argument. And people are afraid of change, and they don't want to lose that seniority. I argue in this race seniority is not working for Utah. And I think that Utah has a great opportunity here to not only replace seniority that's not working for Utah, but replace it with somebody that can lead the Democratic Party. People ask me, well, are you going to go back and be Ted Kennedy's water boy, or are you going to be Hillary Clinton's massage therapist? What are you going to do? You're going to just be beholden to the Democratic Party. And I say, you know what, this is a great opportunity to turn the Democratic Party around. Because what we need is not only in Utah, in the West, we need better representation throughout the country. And by winning a very difficult race, all eyes are going to turn to Utah after election. Yeah. The first pledge I made is in regards to democracy, to use collaboration in an open, public manner, the way I'm using it right now. The second pledge is be open and honest about the dealings of my office. In the same way I've done with X-Mission, not only documenting the good, but the bad for everyone to see. I'm publishing my calendar online. Once elected, I'll publish my calls online, depending on whether the individual I'm talking to agrees to that or not. I want to protect individual privacy above all. Number 3 is the incumbent reform. Number 4 is fiscal responsibility. With the growing deficit in Washington that we have, the unbalanced budgets that we've seen to have forever, I don't think it's right that people are giving themselves pay raise on an automatic basis. I have pledged to refuse the pay raise in Washington, donate that to charity until there is a balanced budget and until the deficit is eliminated. Because I think that's the core of doing your job in Washington. And right now they have no motivation to do anything else. They're taking care of health care, pensions, everything else. And then the last pledge is to, I will absolutely not allow nuclear testing in any form or on that testing. I think Utah pays too high of a price.
How do you feel about the XXX domain?
I thought it was a good idea. I don't think it's going to eliminate or categorize all porn on the internet, but I think it was a good idea that would help. I think when it comes to blocking porn on the internet service providers should be doing that at the behest of the customer. Now, I've been doing that since 1997 because people started demanding. And the funny thing about my blocking system, I use an open source system called Dan's Guardian, and an open source list called urlblacklist.com. The only complaints I've received about that system is that it's blocking too much. For some reason, I can't get to the Seattle Times, or it blocked Disney one. And the nice thing about that being an open source system is that I can go in and modify that immediately. I can fix the problem. With some of these closed source solutions, it was like we have to complain to the company, and then the company makes the decision. And it was evidenced by some independent auditing organizations that they were blocking a little bit more than just defensive material. They were blocking the competition. They were doing some political work, all sorts of shenanigans. That's why I settled on an open source solution. And I think that in a market term, that if I was doing a poor job protecting your kids, I eat my own dog. I use the filter on my kids. If I was doing a poor job at that, you would either tell me or you would go to another internet service provider. And there are certainly other internet service providers who take even more draconian controls on blocking the internet, but they have a market too. And if you want to buy their services, I say great. The market should decide in that area. And I think XXX was a good way to deal with that, but it wouldn't have been the final solution.
I want to lead you to publicly talk about our earlier discussion. I told Pete when I got here that I was saddened that I couldn't vote for him. Those of you that know me know I'm extremely conservative, but I'm willing to vote for Pete over Orrin any day. But my main hesitancy is I don't want a Democratic-controlled Senate, and that scares me to death. And so, Pete, if you could just address that the same way you did to me.
I don't want a Democratic-controlled Senate unless I'm there. But Mario is a lot more astute. Mario came up from San Diego to volunteer on my campaign. And he's taken a political science class where he's been analyzing the races, and he believes the Senate's going to turn whether I win this race or not. And so I argue that what Hatch has been saying, that he's going to be chair of the Finance Committee, and finally, after 30 years, we can reform the tax system, is not accurate. If the Democrats have control of the Senate, he's not going to have chair of anything. So the best situation Utah can be in is to have one Democrat and one Republican, and in the Senate. That way, if it does turn over to the Senate, we do have a voice. We do have some control. And I argue, as I argued earlier, we'll have great control because this is such a long shot of a race. So that's the long and short of it, is that we think it's going to turn over regardless of what happens here, and we need to put Utah in a better position to be ready for it.
I'll ask you a tough one.
Yeah.
So do you believe that the internet is or is not physics?
I've moved a few tapes around in my car, so I think it's a combination of both. That's just such a prime example of why we need technology leadership. Ted Stevens ranting on and on about the internet was done with the force of an old man yelling at a potted plant. It was like this guy is not only doesn't understand what he's talking about, but he's a loose screw. He's just going on and speaking about what he doesn't understand. It's not just the internet out there, it's how we approach energy policy. I think Utah has a great opportunity in energy policy, but we've got people in Washington who don't understand any of the alternatives. I think that transportation also requires something with some imagination. We cannot build any more roads in some areas of this country. We do need things like high-speed rail. And yet what's happening in Washington is this lockdown that the auto companies have on it totally prohibits any sort of experimentation with high-speed rail. We need people that have an eye towards the future. As I said, the average age in the Senate is 60 years old. We need people that are worried about the next 50 business people, teachers, students, whatever, better representation throughout the country.
Two questions. First, what attracted you to the Democratic Party as opposed to the Republican Party? And second, I would be remiss if I didn't ask about No Child Left Behind.
No Child Left Behind. I am a Democrat. Well, let me back up a little. When I was considering this race, I wholeheartedly thought about doing it as an independent. Because I do not like the party system in America. I think it prevents people from not only thinking when they go to the election, it prevents elected officials from thinking after they're elected. They just kind of go with the flow and stamp, and that's the end of it. So I don't think the party system is serving America. Now, being realistic, it will be extremely hard to win a race as an independent. And so I had to start to think about what party I closely align myself with. The Republican Party, I believe, has gotten away from what its ideals were. Fiscal responsibility, small government, non-intrusive government. Dwight Eisenhower, I think, exemplified what I love about the Republican Party in that he had concern about the future. Sputnik went up in the 50s, and suddenly we were concerned about the space race. We were concerned about turning out scientists and engineers. We should be doing that today. Dwight Eisenhower, 50 years ago, established the federal highway system. That was a benefit to this country. People may point to that and say, boy, we haven't turned a dime of profit on the federal highway system. And they're being really narrow-minded, and that the country has benefited economically, socially, all across the board by the federal highway system. If the Republican Party was closer to Eisenhower, I would declare myself a Republican. But I feel that it's easier to steer the Democratic Party back to the ideals of Kennedy than it is to steer the Republican Party back to the ideals of Eisenhower. Kennedy also, what a great president, inspired us to go to the moon. And I have to say that the moonshot is one of the things that inspired me to get into science and technology. When I was in kindergarten, I used to run home from school to watch Apollo 17. That was like the greatest thing for a kid to see. And I look around today and I ask, what is inspiring our children today? Well, it's hip-hop artists, it's sports stars, it's celebrities. It's not John Glenn. I saw John Glenn in 1976 in the airport, and I ran up and got his autograph. And that was, again, the best thing I could possibly do. And it inspired me to work towards the goal. Here's a working program. We're going to hold it up for you to look at. We suggest you take a look at it. Or they should be saying, you know what, science and technology is important. That's what we're going to charge people with to move forward this year. But enforcing it, saying you don't get the money unless you pass the test scores, I think is wrong. The best people to make decisions in our schools are parents first, teachers second, and then the state.
If I could add something real quick. I just wanted to tell people something. When I first interviewed with the campaign, the first thing I said to him, I said, I'm not a Democrat, nor am I a Republican, and I don't plan to register with either party just to get a job with the campaign. I said, if that's a problem, we need to shake hands right now and go separate ways. And in fact, I believe, Mario, wasn't the last race you worked on a Republican?
I have worked for 2 Republicans. I'm a registered independent, and I work for that man for.
Right, and I think it's indicative of not only the people on the campaign, but the candidate. We all feel like Pete is for Utah first, Utah and his family, and party second. If I didn't feel that way, I wouldn't be working for the campaign because I've never felt comfortable with either party personally. That's just my own 2 bits to add. Sorry.
And I should add, if you go to my website, you'll see a more lengthy declaration of why I'm a Democrat. One of the things that struck me from a very early age, my mother was a Democrat down in Utah. And I asked her, why in the world are you a Democrat when everybody around you is Republican? Our next door neighbor was one of the campaign chairs for Ronald Reagan in Utah. And he and my mother had an allergy. But, she quoted from Hubie Brown, who said, he's a Democrat because he believes they're going to the poor. And I believe that helping people who can't help themselves is one of the greater missions we have in life.
Let's go along with that topic. What are your feelings about welfare reform?
I I think that the amount of welfare we give to individuals to get out of poverty, to get a leg up, is inconsequential in comparison to the amount of welfare we give to companies. People ask me what is the first thing you're going to do in Washington. And I tell them the number one thing I'm going to do is go back and repeal the tax credits for oil companies. In building my own business, I never got any help from any government entity to build my business. I asked, but I got refused. And I see very profitable entities working in a non-speculative area, making billions of dollars. And I'm not saying they should be taxed for windfall profits, I'm saying they should be taxed like I'm taxed. And that means getting rid of tax credits. I think some of those tax credits can be used in better areas, but when I hear stories about disabled people throughout Utah not getting the funding they need from our government, it's small fry in comparison to those tax credits. You eliminate those tax credits and $100 million would cover just about every state in the union by disability. I'm not for people getting a free ride. I'm absolutely for personal responsibility. But when you're disabled, you're elderly, you're unable to work for yourself, I think there is a societal right for people to help you out. And I've argued with a lot of constitutionalists on this issue. A lot of people say, Social Security is theft for me, it's giving to the poor, it's not right. I view Social Security as a little bit more of an insurance policy in our entire society. I don't want to see grandmothers and children out begging in the street. And I think Social Security does deserve some reform, deserves some tweaking, but we have much more pressing issues like health care in America. As a small business, I have tried to absorb all the health care costs of my employees. And I have seen over the past decade premiums rise and benefits drop, and more excuses coming from the supposed free market. I don't think it's a free market anymore. You have two choices in Utah to get health care insurance. And I think there is a role for the government to step in and adjust the situation. I don't know if it's as drastic as the national insurance program. I would like to see nonprofit, non-governmental entities get a whack at it first and have full, open, accountable transparency as to the process. But I think there's a lot we can do in this area. On a larger issue, is this part of the Constitution? I believe it is. People say that it's not enumerated in the Constitution, it's not part of it. Well, a lot of things aren't enumerated in the Constitution. We shouldn't be having an Air Force because it's not enumerated in the Constitution. We shouldn't protect children because it's not enumerated in the Constitution. So I believe when there's consensus to do something for the good of the country, it should be done. Yeah.
What's your campaign strategy?
Good question. I think not only in addition to getting out there early and getting their name out as much as possible, earned media is a key part of this race. And if you look at my website, you'll see over 80 pieces of earned media this race has gotten. I don't know the last time, if ever, the BBC covered a Senate race in Utah. And I think it's because I've been doing things differently that they did cover the Senate race. It's also nice to be able to take that media and put it up on my website and republish it for other people that may not be listening on the radio. So earned media is a big part of it. Personal networking is a big part of it. If you like what you've heard today, if you like this channel, if you believe what I'm trying to do, go out and email everybody on your list and say, go check this guy out on his website. I like him. I endorse him. I think he might be a great senator in Washington. That networking, I think, can resolve a lot of the issues around the need for money, the need for millions of dollars. Again, I gave you some examples. I think it's going to happen in American politics. I think it's going to happen in this race. If it doesn't happen in this race, it's going to happen in another race. And it's kind of going to be this watershed event, paradigm shift, whatever you want to call it, where other people are going to start jumping and doing the same thing. Howard Dean was kind of the model for internet politics in the presidential race. Howard Dean, though, had a number of other things going for him. Number one, he was in a presidential race. He was getting media attention from all sorts of media, magazine, radio, television, you name it. And people were going to his website, and the reason they were donating in such mass numbers is for the first time it was very easy. He was the eBay of political candidates. We probably wouldn't be buying as much junk as we buy today if it hadn't been for eBay making it easy to do. Howard Dean was that equivalent, but Howard Dean talked about how he only scratched the surface of the internet. And I believe through the cultivation of mailing lists, through the cultivation of people talking to people, a friend of yours can believe you more than you can believe a commercial can be on TV. So that networking is essential. Mario, you want to come to that?
You folks right here do a huge service for our strategy. You guys are all familiar with Dig. Every now and again, Pete appears on Dig. What we need is people to dig those stories and get them up, to make comments on other stories. When you see something like, as Stephen's talking about, tubes, make the comment. There is an alternative. We can send somebody that's tech savvy to the Senate, and that would help us immensely. It would help drive the attention to, if you guys are familiar with the politics, we talk about the net roots, which is the Howard Dean thing. There's websites like ActBlue that they cull all of these donations and they send them to different candidates. So you could go and you make the post, you make your comment and include the link right to Pete's donate page or right to the ActBlue page that donates to Pete. And all of a sudden somebody donates us $5 from Florida or from Alabama or from Silicon Valley. You just never know where it's going to come from, but we need that. And if you guys are willing to be a digger, we can set up a mailing list. So every time we see one of these stories, we can just send an email out to the big army, and they can just top our stories
My
up the list.
attention is critical from a monetary standpoint. I get emails all the time where people say, "Boy, you're a great candidate. I wish you were running in my state, but I can't vote for you." Well, there is a way people outside can vote for you by sending me $100. And there are some encouraging signs in this race. Last fall, there was a poll done, which is called the Naked Realizer, where they said, "Would you vote for Senator Hatch, or do you think it's time to give somebody else a chance?" In that poll, Senator Hatch ran numbers of 45%. Someone else ran numbers of 48%. Now, things break down when they say Hatch versus Ashdown, because 70% of Utahns still have no idea who I am. Most of Utah has heard about my company, but they have no idea who's the man behind it. So it's getting that word out, it's spreading it, it's getting people aware. As things get past Labor Day, this is going to heat up, and I think we've got a great foundation.
Senator Hatch to be available to
He hasn't been so far. We've challenged him. Well, he's been asked 3 times. We personally challenged him twice. No response. The way he's done this in the past is around the last week of October, he'll agree to a couple of dates, maybe one. We're going to try and get him going in September. But in reality, I wish I could debate him a dozen times. I don't think it's going to have any effect on the race. What's going to have the effect on the race is people understanding my background, understanding that I'm native Utah, understanding what I've done with taxation, and feeling comfortable. It doesn't matter how much I clobber Senator Hatch. It matters that people understand.
Can I just say that Senator Hatch wasn't interested in coming to talk to us? I don't know why, but...
Does anyone work for myfamily.com? Did he come talk to you guys?
I work for it.
I heard you came to talk to myfamily.com and somebody heckled it.
I'm going to see him, I think, on Thursday this week, and so I'm interested. I'm going to ask a lot of the same questions that we asked you tonight to him, just kind of see my own personal view of the debate.
I'd love to see the response.
Post it on the website.
Do you have a blog?
I'll blog about it, yeah.
Good, good. Yeah.
Abortion.
It's a tough one. You know, I am not for elective abortion. I want to put that out there right now. The problem I see in not restricting abortions further is the rape question. If you're going to say only rape, incest, and help of the mother, which I think most people agree, how do you define rape? How do you define the government defining the difference between rape and promiscuity? Nobody's been able to figure that out. They might be willing to listen. We've got a wiki subject about this. The way you reduce elective abortion is getting to the point where we don't need abortion in the first place. And that's through contraception. Contraception people like Mayor Seguini in Midvale have taken CDBG block grants and cut teenage pregnancies in half through realistic education and moving forward to stop this and maybe get it to I wish we could get rid of all of it. I don't see how we can do that with confines of protect the people.
Okay, thank you. If you guys still have questions, you can email them in to Pete. He will answer them.
Yeah.
You can post them on the wiki. I expect to see 50 posts on the wiki in the next 5 days. Please don't disappoint me. Comment, help us out. It's great. We love to hear the questions. We will answer them for sure. It's not going to be Senator Hatch's form feed response. You're going to get a real response.
We have swag.
Oh yeah, lots of swag, t-shirts. We've got only the extra large and the double extra large today.
But if you want one,
That doesn't fit you, we have a problem in the office. And we do have a couple of yard signs that have the front of the car. And also, get on the yard sign map. Get a yard sign, take a picture of it, send it in to us. We're using Google Maps to chart it throughout the state.
Thanks, Pete.